Stareable Fest 2021 is a 4-day celebration of innovation in independent streaming series. We're a creator convention, bringing you the most relevant production workshops, panel discussions, giveaways, and an industry marketplace connecting the next wave of indie series to execs at AMC Networks, Blumhouse, Disney TV Animation, and more. We're a festival, screening your new faves, from rich fantasy to absurdist comedy, hosting an award ceremony, and several parties to kick it with your fellow fans and creators alike.
If you call me if you call
Hello, and welcome to today's conversation, Meet the Showrunner with Jeff Rake. Stareable Fest is the premier annual indie TV and web series festival in the US, and the new home for digital creative talent in the TV industry. We honor the year's best content and provide a space for the next generation of creators to connect with industry executives, grow their network, learn new skills, and build community. Stareable Fest is presented by Dell Technologies with NVIDIA, making workstation and monitor solutions purpose-built for creators like you. We'd also like to thank our other sponsors and partners, AMC Networks, Disney TV Animation, Rizzle, and Just for Laughs, for making Stareable Fest 2021 possible. My name is Ajay Kishore. I'm the founder and CEO of Stareable, and I'll be your moderator today. Now I'd like to welcome our guest, Jeff Rake. Jeff, welcome to Stareable Fest.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
Maybe as a way of getting started, I'd love to just have you kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and your work.
Sure, I'm happy to do it. So my name is Jeff Rake. I'm a writer-producer, showrunner. I'm currently running my show Manifest, which premiered on NBC a few years back and now exists on Netflix. I've been writing and producing for over 20 years, mostly in the broadcast space, and excited now to be moving over to streamers. And you know that's my story. We can deep dive more into it, but I've been lucky to be writing and producing television for a couple decades, and happy to talk about my experience.
And so, thank you for that. One thing you mentioned to me before is, you had this very non-standard introduction to the business. Can you tell us a little bit about, how you started out working in TV?
Yeah, I certainly can. So, like a lot of people, I started doing something else because, you go to college and you think, well, I can't write for television. How's one supposed to do that? So I went to law school, like you do. And I became an attorney, and I came out of law school and I practiced for a year or two, but I always had that creative bug, like so many of us who aren't sure how to kind of get in, what the path is into entertainment. You might take a safe route, but that doesn't mean that in your spare time, you're not trying to tap into your creative energy. So right. I would write, and I would write songs, and I would write sketches, and I would host the variety show in law school, and I would, do those things that you do on the fringes of creativity. But 2 years into my legal career, I looked at myself in the mirror one day and I realized this is not the path that I wanted to be on. I took a leave of absence from the law firm that I was working at, and I mounted a play. I had the audacity to write a hip hop musical about Elvis Presley. And this is the late 90s. And I had no business writing a hip hop musical, but I did book music lyrics almost 2 decades before Lin-Manuel. And I mounted my show at a tiny little theater in Hollywood, California. I was practicing law in LA at the time. I grew up in LA, but I wasn't dialed into the entertainment industry. And anyway, that was just kind of my epiphany. I spent a couple months doing that. I lost every dollar in my savings account, but you know, I made something happen. I put it up on stage. I filled the seats for you know, a couple months, and I said, I can do this. I can do this. And I went home and had a talk with my wife, and she was super cool and supportive. And I quit my job and stayed home with our baby. We had a baby at the time. We now have 4 babies that aren't exactly babies anymore.
Right.
But, you know, so I became that guy staying home, you know, being Mr. Mom and figuring out how to write scripts. And anyway, within 2 years, I got my first job, and you know, I'm happy to keep kind of talking about, you know, how that first job led to other jobs, led to a career in the business. But that was my way in. You know, I took a leap, and you know, just kind of bet on myself. Never went to film school. Never took a class, honestly. I read a lot of scripts. You know, I went to you know, we have a couple cool libraries here in LA, but now it doesn't matter because I'm sure you can access everything online. In the late 90s, it was a little bit more brick and mortar. And, you know, I went and I read my favorite movie screenplays. At the time, I thought I was going to write movies. And, you know, I just kind of taught myself to write by reading stories that I loved, reading movies that I loved. And so, you know, my first writing samples were feature writing samples, kind of rom-com type stuff. And it turned out I was a television writer, and I didn't know that. It took some movie producers to tell me that.
How does that conversation look, where people are sitting down and saying, "You're a TV writer at heart"?
Yeah. And it wasn't so much that I was told, "Hey kid, you'll never be a film writer," but I just kind of got some positive feedback, you know, telling me that they thought that, you know, my writing lent itself to TV, and the way it specifically happened for me is that I'd written a feature screenplay, and my first payday. This is probably 2 years after I quit that job at the law firm. My first payday was getting a very modest deal in which this feature screenplay that I had written was optioned by a company, kind of a mini studio. But when they optioned it, they upfront said to me, you know, we don't think we can get this made as a movie, but we want to pay you to redevelop it as a TV pilot. And we did exactly that, and they were good on their word, and they paid me, and we over the next 2 years we set up that project twice. We went and they became my studio. We went and we pitched it. Again, this is 1999, 2000. Pitched it out to broadcast. I mean, it was kind of like broadcast, Showtime, and HBO. I think that was the entire universe at the time. And we sold it twice. We sold it once to ABC. We sold it once to CBS. Never got made. But I got paid a couple times to redevelop that TV pilot. And then that same script, that original feature script that got me those 2 TV gigs, also made its way to a famous showrunner. You'll probably all recognize the name Darren Starr, who's still quite relevant. At the time in the late 90s, he was in the middle of his, you know, breakthrough hit series, Sex and the City on HBO. Prior to that, he had crushed it in broadcast with Beverly Hills 90210 and Melrose Place. And, you know, those shows have since been remade to great success. Anyway, Darren Starr was handed that same script that I had written, and then I had one of those kind of Cinderella story lunches. This is right around the time when I was just kind of getting traction with that same company. It was the same producers, the same people who brought me on for that first TV job. They worked with Darren. They gave Darren my script, and I got a call out of the blue from my manager. Sidebar, how did I get a manager, you know, not having, you know, any traction in entertainment? And the answer is my manager was my younger brother's buddy, who was probably 23 at the time and was an assistant to a manager. But he told me he was a manager. And you know what? That was okay, because in fact, he had his boss's Rolodex, and he had the ability to get scripts out to other, managers and producers, or at least to the assistants of other managers and producers. And one of the truisms of Hollywood, 20 years ago, and I think it's still the case, is that in many ways, the assistants run the business. And if you can get in, so pro tip, folks, if you can get in with an assistant, that's a good head start. And anyway, so I had this young quasi manager who was getting my scripts out, got my script to this company that ended up making this deal with me. They introduced me to Darren Starr. My manager calls me one day and said, "Hey, Darren Starr wants to have lunch with you tomorrow." I said, "How does Darren Starr know who I am?" He said, "I don't know, but be at Maple Drive in Beverly Hills tomorrow at 12:30. And I had lunch with Darren Starr, and he said, "Hey, I read that script that you wrote. I liked that script. I just like your dialogue. I like how you write guys." And then he proceeded to tell me that he had just set up a TV pitch. He had just pitched a TV show to Fox. And that's where he had most of his broadcast success. Again, 90210, Melrose Place. And he said, so I just sold this pitch to Fox about Wall Street, about bankers and traders, but it's really just about guys being guys, and then women breaking into this industry, and guys and women and how they interact with each other. And that's sort of that's sort of, the vibe of your script. And I want you to create the show with me. Sorry, what? And he said, "No, I want you to create, do you want to come on and create this show with me?" And anyway, so it was one of those kind of weird, super unusual unicorn moments where I was plucked from true obscurity to co-create a television show. And I wrote that pilot. And while that other project that I was telling you about that I developed twice never went anywhere, this project with Darren Starr actually got made. It got on the air. If you look way up at the top of or bottom of IMDb, you'll see my first show was a show called The Street. The Street. This is 2000. The S was a $sign. Get it? The Street. And we got on the air, and we were immediately canceled. We aired for about 6 we aired for about 6. I'll never forget. We premiered Wednesday night, 9:00, great time slot, opposite season 2 of West Wing. So that was tough.
That was tough.
And West Wing kicked our ass. 6 episodes in, we were gone. But the thing is, now I was in, and to write a pilot and then shoot that pilot and then shoot 10 episodes of television. We shot 10. Only 6 got on the air, but we shot 10. But that was almost 2 years of my life, right? So that was the university of television for me. And I learned how to do it. I learned how to write a TV pilot. I learned how to produce a TV pilot. Baptism by fire, I sort of learned how to run a TV show. Not really. And I'm going to come back to that because not really. But I sort of learned the ropes. And now I was part of the television community, and I was able to dine out on that. And that's how my career got off the ground.
So we were chatting before. I think that's so interesting to hear about, and it echoes some of the themes that we heard from. I was mentioning that we spoke to Derek Waters yesterday. We spoke to Chris Pancrado the day before, and it feels like two things that both of them really emphasized were you got to constantly be creating. You got to get in the reps, right, and constantly be like honing that muscle, that creative muscle. But also it's about like building relationships and allowing people to see your work and allowing them to kind of create their own connections and interactions with it. Do you think that's fair to say when you think about like how one breaks into the industry? Does that feel like the two like key themes for like what you need to be focusing on?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. If I were to kind of break it down, I would say it's a few things. Certainly, it's all about, original content, your original idea. And now more than it feels like we're light years away from 2000 when I broke into the business, and 20 years later, there's good news and bad news. The good news is there are so many more outlets, there are so many more opportunities to sell your wares, and thanks to the dawn of cable followed by streamers, and in particular streamers, I think that the model of success has changed, in the sense that back in the day, your concept really needed to have potential to kind of really be a home run, right? Really kind of be a 4-quadrant, get everybody in the household invested in your show. So you kind of needed to land that very special original idea that maybe could be a blockbuster. It's less about that now, and that's really the good news, because there's, particularly with the streamers, where the business model is about just subscriptions and bringing more people, to that platform. If you can come up with a show that just maybe brings a tiny extra segment of viewers to their platform, that could be a win for that platform. And that's huge. That's huge, right? Let's just break that down. It used to be that if you couldn't come up with a show that everybody was going to love, that was going to get a huge rating, and be the next Grey's Anatomy, right? Or be the next The Office, or whatever, fill in the blank. It was an uphill battle. And now, so many very specific ideas that clearly aren't going to bring everybody to that channel, to that platform, can be a big win, because it's just helping round out, the inventory of that platform. And so, and the reason I bring that up right now, which sounds like kind of a sideways answer to your question, is because I think that speaks to original content. So therefore, the most important idea, I think, right now, in 2021, pushing 2022, for those who are trying to break into the business, is coming up with an undeniably original idea that is not, on the air, is not on a platform, and so while it doesn't have to be, something that as a theatrical release would become a blockbuster. And it can be something that, in that theatrical, metaphor, could be much more of a very niche indie film, concept. It still has to be distinctly original. It has to be not out there. Only if you already have a proven track record can you come up with a show that's like that other show, but you're going to do it differently. You're not going to get that at bat unless there's something about your show or something about your protagonist that is so fundamentally distinct. It separates it from the pack. So that's number one. That's number one. It's just, and it goes without saying that the writing has to be great and strong. And Steve Martin has an old joke, how to become a millionaire. Number one, get $1 million, and to that extent, the first thing you have to do to become a TV creator is to become a great writer. I can't help you with that. You just have to figure that out for yourself. But so we're kind of assuming that the writing is strong, right?
Right.
But once the writing is strong, it's about, number one, that very distinct idea, that very distinct way in, utter originality. And that's true in comedy. That's true in drama, horror, and whatever your genre is, right? Don't chase an idea that that can be so easily compared to other shows that are on. I mean, if it reminds you of something that was done a long time ago, okay, sure. But if it's something that is, in the current or recent landscape, I would encourage you to put that on the back shelf, come back to it when you're already a success. And for your break-in idea, your break-in original pilot that you're going to spend, the next year of your life crafting and sending out and using all of your relationships, calling in all your chits, make sure it's original. So that's number one, long-winded answer. And then number two is about strategic alliances. Finding people to collaborate with, getting your piece of material to the right producer, to the right director, to the right executive, to the right, anyone in the industry who can help you, collaborate. It took me a long, long time to learn this lesson, but when you, if you ever open up, Deadline or Variety or Hollywood Reporter, and you read about some show that just sold, and you read that article, you'll typically find that like 5 or 6 people or 7 or 8 people were all somehow involved in the sale of that show. And you might ask yourself, why, how did so many people get involved? Why are there so many cooks in the kitchen? And the answer is that, these strategic alliances help get shows, sold. And if you're somebody who hasn't found your way into the business yet, you're going to succeed. You're going to do that by clawing your way in through cultivated relationships. In a sense, there is a meritocracy that exists in the television business. The best scripts typically rise to the top, but not every best script gets made. And so therefore, it's typically a confluence of a great script and strategic alliances, the package, as it's sometimes referred to, which, that producer plus that director plus that actor plus that writer, and that's typically, not always, that's typically how it gets done. So anyway, super long-winded answer, but if I had to break it down, it's about that original piece of material, and then it's about the strategic alliances you've created based on that original material.
One of the things that we've heard from those other conversations is that evolution of how the TV industry has changed, and that features used to be the focus, and TV was less of the primary focus for the industry. And there was also a little bit more of like a apprenticeship system, right? You'd start out at a lower rung as maybe a writer's assistant or something like that, and you'd slowly work up. And it feels like that kind of gives you more of an opportunity to build those sorts of strategic relationships and create more of a partnership over time. If you were thinking about breaking in now, how would you change kind of your strategy and think about where you would focus your efforts?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's actually very relevant to kind of the next chapter of my origin story. The relationships that one can potentially develop in this business typically start from the bottom up. So you just referred to kind of the idea of becoming a writer's assistant, and again, that's a little bit like the same Steve Martin joke that I alluded to, because, hey, go become a writer's assistant. And then if you're watching this right now, you're probably, throwing something at the screen and saying, yeah, I'd love to be a writer's assistant. How do I become a writer's assistant? And that's hard. That's hard because there aren't a lot of, yes, there are a lot of those jobs because every television show has a writer's assistant. But even if there's 400 television shows, the fact that there's only 400 writer's assistant slots isn't a lot, given that there's thousands upon thousands of people trying to break into the TV business at any one time. And so you go, well, how do I become the person, who becomes who becomes the writer's assistant. I don't have a great, answer to that. It is just kind of networking, hustle, joining writers groups, taking classes. It used to be you had to kind of like move to LA or move to New York. Probably not so much anymore. My writer's room for Manifest for the last 2 years, we haven't even had a proper brick and mortar room. We're just on Zoom. I have a writer who lives in London who works on Manifest. I probably will never meet her. Hopefully I will someday. But anyway, that's great, right? That's very free. My assistant right now lives in Chicago. I never met that guy either. And so there is something super cool about the fact that it doesn't really matter where you are. Now that'll probably go away after COVID. That might just be a little brief window. But anyway, getting into that assistant network, and by the way, under writer's assistant, there's often the writer's PA. There's another job called script coordinator, which is a little bit more about, it's a lot of things: formatting scripts, doing clearances, sending out, things, a little more administrative, but it's a way in. Every show typically has a writer's assistant, a writer's PA, a script coordinator, a showrunner's assistant, and then over in the production office, there's a bunch of assistants. So every TV show has many, assistants, and that's just a crapshoot. That's just, being tenacious and LinkedIn and DMing, people and just, trying to play not the telephone game, trying to play like the who game with friends and friends of friends. Look, there are fellowships and there are internships that you can apply to for your scripts, and the Writers Guild has programs on the East Coast and the West Coast, and I'd encourage any aspiring, writer or creator to apply to every fellowship and internship under the sun. Some of them, result in winners being groomed by studios and networks, and then eventually kind of being pushed to shows. Hey, consider these people as your assistants. The assistant, the script coordinator that we just hired, is somebody who was kind of recommended because she went through internship program through the Writers Guild to learn how to become a script coordinator. Anyway, all of those things are worth looking into. But to kind of get back to your question, when you're asking me about kind of like the value of networking within a show, becoming an assistant, becoming friends with other assistants, writers on your show, super important. And just to make it all about me again for just a couple more minutes, if you'll indulge me.
That's why we're here.
Okay, good. So my kind of blessed Cinderella story entree into the television business was a mixed bag in the following way. So that story that I just told a few minutes ago about being taken out to lunch and being handed, the opportunity to co-create a television show, a show that I literally didn't even have to pitch, right? There's nothing easier than that, right? Like the show was literally sold already to Fox. And then this guy picked up the phone and called them and said, hey, I found the guy who's going to write the script with me. And that was that. And then I did write that script, and then that script got on the air, and then I was co-showrunner. That's insane, right? I mean, the way it normally works is you become a PA, and you're a PA until you're in your late 20s, and you're like, shit, why am I still a PA? I'm 28, I'm 30, I shouldn't be a PA anymore. And then you somehow become a writer's assistant. And then slowly but surely in your 20s to 30s, you become staff writer, again, staff writer. It's third year. How am I still a staff writer? Finally, you become story editor, and it goes on. And you all have probably noticed from watching a ton of television that there's all these different titles: co-producer, producer, supervising producer, co-executive producer. They're all writers, people. They're all writers at just various levels of seniority. It's how you work your way, up the chain. So, in a way, as you're deducing, I skipped those steps, right? I went from zero, nobody, to showrunner to the top, right? From never having even been a PA, nothing, right? I was just like a dude at a law firm. And I went straight to showrunner. And not only did I go straight from nothing to showrunner, but after that first show was canceled, because it was on the air and because people liked it, and it was good. It was good. I was writing really great scripts. And therefore, when my show was summarily canceled, I was presented with a multitude of opportunities to keep developing TV shows. And I did exactly that, of course. The point of this story, though, is that I at that very early point in my career, there was a fork in the road, and I didn't appreciate the fact that there was a fork in the road. And the fork in the road was, hey, Jeff, we really liked that pilot that you made that got on the air. Hey, we want to pay you, and we'll pay you a lot of dough, and just keep writing TV pilots for us. And that sounded pretty awesome. At the same time, there was at least one other opportunity where another very successful showrunner, a really wonderful writer, producer, showrunner, iconic guy in the pantheon of television, Stephen Bochco, may he rest in peace, was also a fan of my writing. Again, this is 20 years ago. And after my show was canceled, I had a meeting with Stephen Bochco, and he liked my writing and wanted to kind of be a mentor to me, and asked me if I wanted to come work for NYPD Blue, which would have been such a great job, right? You guys remember NYPD Blue? If you don't, go watch an episode. It was one of the greatest TV shows of all time. This is also the guy who co-created Hill Street Blues. He was an icon. He was a giant. And I didn't take that opportunity because I was a little bit arrogant. And I thought, why do I have to go work for NYPD Blue? I mean, I love NYPD Blue. I love to watch NYPD Blue, but these other studios are offering me as much or more money to just go create my own show again. And that's what I did. And I just kind of kept creating. And I spent the next 5, 6, 7 years getting paid to write and occasionally produce my own TV pilots. And a few more pilots got made. I got another show on the air. If you look again a little bit above the street on my IMDb, you'll see a short-lived show called Mismatch with Alicia Silverstone. If you remember Alicia Silverstone from the 90s, Clueless. Remember that movie, Clueless?
Yeah.
I did that one with Darren Starr also. We got that on the air. It lasted a little bit longer. It lasted like a full season. So I got that on the air, and then a couple failed pilots. The end of this narcissistic story is that 7 or 8 years later, when none of these pilots that I had written became a hit television show, the studio stopped paying me to write pilots. And guess what? Not only did they stop paying me to write pilots, but because I never, had the long view, and I never realized that part of becoming a successful television writer and showrunner was not just to keep writing, clever TV pilots, but was also to immerse myself in an environment of success and learn from others how to write and sustain a successful television show, which, I probably could have done had I taken that fork, that would have led me, down that path with Stephen Bochco and learned from the other writers at NYPD Blue or any show, because, after my early success, I probably could have, gotten a job to be a TV writer on a bunch of different shows. And I didn't do it. And as a result, I never really learned how to sustain a successful television series. I didn't put in my hours, right? I didn't put in my reps. And so, I found myself at kind of the early midpoint of my career out of work. literally couldn't get a job. Was married. I mentioned that. Had a bunch of kids. Couldn't get a job, and that lasted like 5 years. 5 years, and I'm slightly overstating the case. I wasn't on the unemployment line. I did manage to kind of like squeak together, selling a pilot here, consulting in a limited capacity on a show there, but I did not have job security. And with historical perspective, I blame that insecurity, 5 years of job insecurity, on the fact that I did not put in the time and I did not give myself the opportunity to work my way up the ladder. That is the natural order of things. Didn't mean that I had to go be a PA again. Didn't mean that I had to go be a writer's assistant. But I never spent, those years in a writer's room learning. And now cut to 21 years later, and just very quickly, by 2013, I actually got a job. A very benevolent showrunner named Greg Berlanti, who is one of the great, success stories of the modern television era, hired me and staffed me on one of his shows. And for the first time, I worked 22 episodes on a TV show, and I learned from Greg Berlanti how to run a TV show. Thank you, Greg Berlanti. And then Greg Berlanti came on board when I developed my next TV show, and I created a TV show called Mysteries of Laura, which was nothing to write home about, but it was a TV show, went for a couple years on NBC with Deborah Messing. And then I was back, and 2 years later, Manifest. And anyway, so I'm a success again. Good for me. But here's the thing. 21 years later, after the beginning of that story, right now is the first season 4 of a television show that I've ever been a part of. Last year, season 3 was the first season 3 of any TV show that I had ever been a part of in 20 years in the business, right? And I partly attribute that to the fact that I didn't make all of the right choices. And so if I could do it again, super long-winded answer to your question, if I could do it again, I would start at the bottom and work and put in my hours and not be greedy, and take my time and learn, listen and learn. Easier said than done, but that would have been my path.
That seems to be something that, I think I certainly feel as an individual, and has also been kind of a theme in some of our conversations. I think we all naturally want to feel like there's going to be a linear progression to life in our careers. And so it's very hard sometimes to take a step back and say, well, but is that next kind of incremental step the right one? Or is there an opportunity to take a step back? It feels like it also kind of applies to show concepts. And like one thing that Derek Waters said yesterday was, you have to kind of let a show idea breathe, right? And see how it evolves as you develop it, but also how it relates to kind of the context of like what's happening in broader society. And the reason I bring that up is I've read that, Manifest, I was reading about Squid Game, and I saw that, it was originally developed in 2009, and the creator pitched it to every studio imaginable. And then I came across that you said something similar, that Manifest was almost a decade in the making. Can you talk a little bit about, how it kind of evolved from that initial kernel of an idea, and then also like how do you keep the faith in a project? Like how do you know or have a sense that this is something that's worth revisiting and worth giving that like room to breathe?
Yeah. My story is the same as the Squid Game guy. I mean, it's the same story. I pitched Manifest. I didn't have the name Manifest yet, but I pitched the same show, the same pitch that I ultimately sold to NBC 4 years ago. 14 years ago, right? So 2008, 2009, I had the idea, and I went and I pitched it everywhere. And everywhere again was just like the 4 places, and nobody bought it. And back in my kind of timeline, this was just when I kind of like became cold again, right? Like when I had just kind of run out of gas as a creator. And that's part of the reason probably why the show didn't sell. That because in 2008, I was a guy who, you know, had sold a bunch of pilots, had put a couple shows on the air, and none of them had stuck, you know, and the executives knew that, you know, it's like they're not dummies. They knew who I was. And so when I walked in with this very ambitious, you know, idea, serialized mystery, that was going to be probably a pretty high, you know, budget show and require, you know, multiple seasons of one sustained, you know, mythological journey. You know, it's a big ask of a studio or a network to take that ride, particularly with a guy who, you know, didn't have a particularly successful track record, and a guy who wasn't a genre guy. And to the extent that I had any success, it was like in, you know, grounded procedural dramedy. I wasn't writing, you know, mythology shows. I wasn't in the supernatural space. It was a little off-brand for me. Also, Lost was just wrapping up, and I think they felt like, well, okay, Lost just happened. We already had a mythological show about an airplane, and not only had Lost just happened, but you know, for those of you who remember Lost, while still kind of considered one of the great breakthrough shows of the modern television era, late in its run, Lost was kind of like getting mixed reviews, and people were saying, you know, oh, well, Lost kind of lost its way, blah, blah, blah. And so I had the misfortune of pitching my show kind of probably around like the second to last season of Lost, when a lot of people were like, even Lost couldn't sustain Lost. So how's Jeff Rake going to sustain this show? And they all passed. They all passed, and I put it on the shelf. And so to your next question, well, how do you know when to take it off the shelf? You know, I don't really know how to answer that other than to say I never stopped thinking about it. I just knew, you know, it's like sometimes you just know, right? And I knew that the hook was huge. I knew that everybody would watch the pilot. I just knew, you know, the stuff was there for an incredibly provocative pilot. And I'm a good character writer. I know how to tell a story emotionally. And I just knew that with the right director and the right producing partners, it would be an incredibly powerful pilot. I knew that. Did I know that it would be a successful series? I didn't, because at the time I had literally never run a successful series. And to be honest with you, I was scared to death that if I ever got it on the air, that I would blow it. Because at the time I had only blown it, you know. But I just believed that I would find the right people to help me to continue to tell that story. And it was just one of those things where every year, you know, 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, you know, all those years when I would think, okay, what am I going to try to sell this year? I would turn back to it and go, what about that? Is it time yet? A really big event, obviously, was, you know, when that Malaysian Airlines flight disappeared. That was kind of a real world tragic mystery that spoke to, you know, my concept. And so all of a sudden there was something in the real world zeitgeist that I could point to if I were going to go pitch it and say, okay, Malaysian Airlines, what if that really happened? And not only what if that really happened, what if tomorrow, next week, next month, that flight landed, you know, at JFK in New York. So all of a sudden, you know, there was kind of a real world framework, and I did do exactly that. I you know, incorporated that to the beginning of my pitch. And I came up with the name Manifest, which is a really good title, obviously, for a TV show about a missing airplane. That's also about kind of like intentionality and redemption and soulfulness. So I had a good concept. I had a good title. I had a real world event to point to, but also now 10 years later, or not 10 years later, 7, 8 years later, when I sold the show this second time around, I had surrounded myself with important strategic partners. So remember a half hour ago when I was talking about strategic partnerships? So this time around, I was no dummy. I went to, Robert Zemeckis, one of the great, directors of the modern movie era. Hopefully you know that name. If you don't, look him up. Everything from Back to the Future to Castaway, to Flight. Remember Flight with Denzel Washington? Remember Contact, the Jodie Foster movie? So he had an incredible track record with breakout popcorn concepts, particularly in the airplane space. And serendipitously, I had been working at Warner Brothers, thanks to the good graces of showrunner Greg Berlanti, who brought me into the Warner Brothers family. So now I had Warner Brothers, and then I went to the Zemeckis company and I pitched them this idea. This time I got a sale. Now, by the way, did everybody make an offer? No. In fact, I think only NBC made an offer. Maybe we got like a quasi offer from some other place. But it's not like the pitch was a home run at all these places. Again, I wasn't that guy. I wasn't genre guy. I still hadn't had a hit yet. 15 years into my career. But I surrounded myself with smart people. It was a compelling pitch. I'm very good at pitching, by the way, and that's something to work on. Just telling a compelling story. Emotionally, not just kind of from a place of plot, but from a place of character and emotion, and relating it to the real world, and looking people in the eye and telling them why your story matters. And taking people on an emotional journey. It's good if you can make people cry in a pitch. I can do that sometimes. And anyway, they bought it, and I surrounded myself with smart people. I wrote a great pilot. I was lucky enough to get a great director, David Frankel, Devil Wears Prada and other wonderful movies to direct our pilot. And we shot a great pilot, and we got on the air, and then, anyway, there's much more to that story, but that's how we did it.
We've touched on a couple different facets of like how television has evolved pretty dramatically in the past 10 years, even just for Manifest, right? It's had a number of different homes, second window homes. You were toying with this idea of doing a movie to wrap up the show. And one thing that we've also heard from some of our other conversations is, there's more TV being made right now than ever. But there's also, it feels like there are more gatekeepers, and the path to getting a show on the air is less linear than ever. Like, how do you view kind of where the distribution landscape is going, and how do you think about, like, certainly one of the things that's been that you've mentioned a couple of times is, that idea of building a team and putting together something that's a very attractive overall package. But like, do you see other kind of changes in terms of like how you find a home for a project and what makes a strong pitch?
Yeah. I mean, in part, it connects back to what I was talking about in regard to how I think that a fundamental strategy for success has become less about that 4-quadrant idea that everybody wants to watch. By the way, those are still great ideas. If you can come up with a new one of those, good for you. But about the fact that I feel like the new model for success is about specificity, and then finding, the right home for that specific, idea. The best ideas 20 years ago and beyond could be sold everywhere. The best ideas in 2021 going forward necessarily can't be sold everywhere. If your idea works everywhere, it's probably not the right idea for the modern television landscape. It's probably a little bit too up the middle. Again, there might be a unicorn idea that works for everywhere, but when you think about the breakout shows, of the moment, right? Squid Game, Ted Lasso, I wouldn't even put Manifest, on that list, but like the shows that are just kind of, working right now, that people are kind of like talking about, that become water cooler, that become a conversation. They're very specific. They take a very specific chance and within their genre, and they run at it, and then they bring it to the appropriate buyer, to the appropriate platform. And even before that, like I was saying, they try to bring it to the appropriate collaborator, and that's all that I think about now when I'm developing a new idea. I think about, is it specific enough, right? Is it singular enough? Who does it speak to? And is there someone that I can go to, a director, an actor, producer with a track record, who authentically lives in that space? And I just stumbled upon the word authenticity, and let me just stay there for a minute, because I think that's a huge aspect of a success story. Authenticity. Okay, to whatever extent you can tell a story that is authentically your story, and I don't mean necessarily that it's autobiographical, but it's a story that you authentically are entitled to tell. That's going to make it for a much more compelling sales presentation to a potential collaborator, director, producer, and to a studio or to a network. Why you should tell this story. And so one of my parlor tricks is, whatever my idea is, when I'm trying to kind of put my presentation together, it's not ready in my mind until I have filtered it through the filter of why I get to tell this story. Not only why I get to tell this story, why I'm the only guy who should tell this story. And I challenge all of you, who are out there, trying to figure out how to sell material. Pick a project that you can back up with a story about why this is, your story. And maybe it's because it's something that your mom told you when you were a kid, or maybe it's something that you saw going on at your next door neighbor's house that stuck with you throughout childhood, and it made you the person that you are today, right? Or maybe it's about some terrible accident that you saw happen on the street one random day that has become emblazoned on your brain and forever made you change how you think about the world. You see what I'm doing? Yep. You personalize. I'm not talking, I know you get me, Ajay. I'm talking to everybody. You personalize your story in a way that when you are done pitching your story or pre-pitching your spec script that you want somebody to read, you want that reader, you want that buyer to marry this piece of material that you wrote or this pitch that you're making to the story that you just told that makes us understand why you are the only person who can tell that story. It's super important because you're typically not getting read by the president of the studio, the president of the network. You're typically getting read by middle management, maybe lower management. And you need that person who listened to you, who read your script, to know not only that the script is good, but why you're the person who should sell this show, write this show, produce this show. And then they will go tell their boss. And that's what's going to get your project sold.
That I think is super interesting because we hear a lot about, like, okay, specificity of vision and authenticity of the project. But I think there's something really insightful and interesting about it almost cuts both ways, right? Because that also means that when you think about how to create that compelling package, you need to think about the specifics that make it undeniable and saleable. So for you, it's about taking it to Robert Zemeckis and having him, bring in that authenticity that he brought to the package. It's also about like there being a moment in time with the Malaysian Airlines flight where it becomes something that's kind of within the zeitgeist, and also thinking about kind of what is the home that wants to have this sort of the project. It's not going to be every network or every streaming service. And I think that's super helpful for creators to hear is, well, you need to be thinking about like, well, what are the other things that need to go into this that make this truly saleable and appealing to a specific executive in a specific home.
That's right. That's right. It's super important.
I think we're reaching the top of the hour. I guess if there are any questions in the audience, we can bring one up. Otherwise, I guess I have one kind of question that I would love to get a sense of, which is, you have this particularly rabid fan base. I think most showrunners would kind of kill for the sort of bought-in audience that you had on social when there was a question about Manifest coming back. A lot of independent creators are trying to create that sort of buzz around their shows. You've also talked in interviews and during this conversation about shows that have gotten canceled, right? And so, like, what's your sense of why this was different, and how do you think about kind of cultivating that sort of buy-in with the viewers?
Well, look, I mean, social has become a huge aspect of a show's sustained success, and I certainly have put in the time engaging with our fans, and I love it. And it's fun for me, it's fun for the fans, and particularly on a show that kind of is an evolving mystery, being able to engage with folks on Twitter and Reddit and Facebook and whatnot. It becomes kind of part of the experience of the television show. Becomes more than a TV show. It becomes kind of an interactive community. Did social save Manifest? Probably not. Ultimately, the clicks, the viewers, the new viewers to Netflix saved the show. But I do think there's an organic relationship there between social engagement and people, going and watching the show. It's word of mouth. It's word of mouth, right? Yep. And the fact that I enjoy, and not just me, I'm lucky to have a cast that loves engaging on social, and I have a couple cast members with huge social followings, and we all do it. We all engage. We know it's part of the experience, and I have no doubt that our collective social engagement helped generate that word of mouth, and that word of mouth translated into a bunch of views, and the proof was in the numbers. The Nielsen's now track streaming numbers, and that comes out like weekly or whatever, and you can see that in June and July we were getting 2+ billion minutes, hours. I don't even remember what it was. I mean, we did really well. A lot of people watched Manifest on Netflix this summer, and I think that social engagement contributed to it. And should you be so lucky to get your show on the air, don't take your fans for granted, because fans talk to other people, and social is an avenue to generate that conversation, and it's worth investing time in.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you so much for being here at Stareable Fest. I hope you enjoyed the conversation today.
Very much so.
So thank you all in the audience for joining us, participating, and just being part of this amazing community. Stareable Fest is presented by Dell Technologies with NVIDIA, making workstation and monitor solutions purpose-built for creators like you. We'll see you next time. Our next session is today from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. A look at building fandom, Zombie Orpheus' lessons on creating rabid fan engagement. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great day.